A motion path is a way of editing position animation using a spline curve. It's similar to a path constraint in as much as you can edit a Bezier spline to affect the position of the object. But with motion paths, you don't need an external spline. All you need are just the ordinary position keyframes. If you're used to trajectories from earlier versions of 3ds Max, motion paths are a similar concept. Motion paths replace trajectories and upgrade their functionality. Let's create some animation on this flying saucer in the desert. I'll select it and choose the Move tool and enable Auto Key in the keyframe tools at the bottom. Go down to the last frame of the animation. Click on Go to End and move the flying saucer in the X-axis in the top viewport until it's out of frame. And as soon as you release the mouse, a keyframe is created at frame 180. Let's turn off Auto Key and rewind and play back the animation. I've set up the time configurations so that the animation will play back in all of the viewports. We see a default slow out, slow in on the animation. In this case, I want it to look like the flying saucer is not speeding up and slowing down, so I want linear motion. I'll stop the animation and rewind back to frame 1 and go into the curve editor. Open up the curve editor from the main toolbar. And then let's frame the view. Click on the frame horizontal and value extents. And now all the curves are visible. And the slow out, slow in is clearly visible here, shown as the slope of the X position. Let's also visualize that slow out, slow in using motion paths. With the flying saucer still selected, go over to the motion panel. And there are two modes here. There's parameters and motion paths. When you select motion paths, then we can see the motion path on the selected object. I'll get closer in the top view with the mouse wheel and the middle button. And I want to scrub in the timeline a little bit here just so we can see the motion path more clearly. So I'll scrub down a few frames, and we see some dots or ticks here. Those represent the speed of motion. Each tick is 1 frame apart from its neighbor. So the distance traveled in 1 frame is shown as the distance between ticks. And if they're far apart, that means the object is moving more quickly. Let's now establish a linear motion. Select all of the keyframes in the curve editor. Drag a big rectangle around those. And then from the toolbar in the curve editor, click on Set Tangents to Linear. And now we can see that these dots are evenly spaced. We want to be able to edit this though, and when we convert to linear, then the Bezier handles in the motion path are no longer accessible. So we also want to click on the button to set tangents to spline. And now we see some tangent handles here in the curve editor, and these ones here in the motion path will be more effective now. So I've just set up a linear interpolation here, and that's all I really needed to do with the curve editor. So I can close it. And now when we rewind and play back, we will see a linear motion here in the camera view. Cool, so let's now play around with our motion path. We can add a new keyframe at any location on that path. And it has nothing to do with where we are in time at the current moment. In other words, I could scrub to any time index and create a new keyframe, and that will appear on the current frame in the motion path. So let's do that. We'll go over to the motion panel, click on the Add Key button, and click somewhere in the middle here. And that creates a keyframe, and it just so happens that it landed here on about frame 95. Let's also edit our final position keyframe, which is this one here. We can select that with the Move tool. Be careful that you select the keyframe and not the tangent handle, so you might want to get in closer. So this red box is the actual keyframe, and I can click on that to select it. And go over to the front view and move that down a bit. Trying to monitor how that's actually affecting the position here in the perspective view. So I can tumble around here with Alt and middle mouse, get a sense of what I'm doing with this position key here. All right, cool. So we've got that. We can also look at this a little bit more closely, get in really close with the mouse wheel, and maybe also adjust this tangent handle. See how that affects the motion. All right, excellent. So that's a real basic introduction to motion paths. We can obviously do a lot more with that, but let's rewind and we'll maximize the physical camera view. Select that and choose Alt W, the hotkey, and then rewind and play back. And that's a basic introduction to editing motion paths for position animation. And that wraps up our chapter on content creation tools in 3ds Max 2018.